I'd like to welcome everybody today to a very special edition of Lunch with Layne. And we're very honored to have the Honorable Stacy Scott, who is the elected public defender for the Eighth Judicial Circuit, comprising 6 counties. Is that right, Stacy?
Yes.
In our area. And let me see if I can do this. Alachua, Levy, Gilchrist, Baker, Bradford, and Union. Did I get it?
I think you did.
Great, thank you.
I always have to count on my hands to make sure I got it right. But
I know it's a huge geographical area, right? And sometimes we forget about that. Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. And Stacy, let me talk a little bit about your accolades, and then we'll talk about your office, your employees, and a wonderful group that you've assembled here. You were the county court supervisor, right? And you also helped supervising all the assistant public defenders, right? That were practicing.
Yes.
In that area. Also, very importantly, and I wanted to emphasize this, and thank you for your service in the juvenile division of the public defender's office, and being instrumental helping set up the juvenile drug court program, which I think you and I would both agree very needed in this system to help them out. You've also, of course, worked in numerous felony cases and very serious felonies as well. Immense experience in terms of, I was going to say trial practice, right? As well as all general practice at the public defender's office. And since 2010, right, you've also been the policy advocate in Tallahassee on issues relating to criminal justice. And I'd like to point out that you're the chair of the legislative team. Is that right? Working for the Florida Public Defenders Association?
Yes, I'm the chair of the Appropriations Committee for the Florida Public Defenders Association. And I'm also the vice president of the Florida Public Defender Association.
Thank you. And you also received, and I also want to emphasize this, the Craig Stewart Bernard Outstanding Service Award, right? Which is an award, that's recognizing. And I want to thank you as well, Stacy, for your service to all of us in the, not just the legal community, but the community, okay, at large. And I know you received a couple of President's Awards too for exemplary legislative advocacy on behalf of public defenders.
Yes, thank you.
I could go over. I'll cut to the chase and just say that you also teach at the trial, have taught at the trial practice program at UF, right? Levin College of Law as well. And yes. Oh, you had an accolade. Yeah, please tell us about that, right? With your team.
Right. Well, for a number of years, I was a trial team coach for the University of Florida Law School trial team, and we did lead a team to a national civil rights championship at the St. John's competition in New York City. I was very proud of that and very proud of those students that participated in that competition. And then I'm also, or at least until recently, was a trial practice small group instructor, which is the hands-on trial training program that UF Law was so well known for. Thank
you. Yeah, and I was going to say, go Gators, right?
Yes.
On that. No, I'm very, very proud of you and your team, Stacy, for that accolade. Let me, I could go on and on. Stacy has numerous accomplishments and we could spend all hour on that, but I want to talk a little bit about the Public Defender's Office. How many employees are currently at the Public Defender's Office do you oversee?
Currently, we have 69 employees. We're slated to have about 74, but we have some vacancies. But we have 69 employees across the entire circuit. Most of those employees are stationed in our home office in Alachua County in Gainesville.
Thank you. And Stacy, I know when a lot of people think about public defenders, they think about the criminal defense work, but people forget about, right, the Baker Acts, is it the Marchman Acts, the juvenile justice, component of that as well. So the public defenders actually covers, right, a wide array of various cases.
Yes, I mean, we represent all types of people, from juveniles all the way to death penalty cases. Anyone who is facing a loss of liberty and cannot afford to hire an attorney to represent themselves. So we do all the Baker Acts that come in from our area. We do not do Marchman Acts, actually. That is assigned to the Regional Conflict Council now.
Okay.
But we do all the Baker Acts, and we also do continuation hearings and medication hearings in the state hospitals and forensic facilities that are located within our circuit.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, very specialized work areas. Hey, let's start out with some of the fun questions here. And where did you go to law school?
I went to UF Law. I'm a double gator. I graduated law school in 1995 with honors. In law school, one of my favorite parts of law school was the public defender clinic. I was a certified legal intern here in our office in Gainesville. I also did the trial practice program while I was in law school, which was really instrumental in helping me determine what type of law I wanted to do. And I knew from doing that program that I wanted to be in the courtroom. I wanted to be up and talking to people, and not, sitting behind a desk all day drafting appeals.
Yeah. No, thank you for sharing that, Stacey. I wanted to ask you, how was your law school experience? Because, we hear from a lot of attorneys like, well, it's a lot of archaic cases I had to look at, but it sounded like you gravitated right toward the clinic and found your life's mission.
I did, although I will say that at first, when I went to law school, it was kind of against my will.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Please.
This is I'm being funny, but I
Yeah.
always wanted to be a veterinarian, but I did not get into vet school. My dad is a lawyer. He always wanted me to be a lawyer. And so I had applied to law school, got in sort of with the idea of, well, I don't know if I'm really going to be a lawyer or not, but this is going to be really good for the future no matter what. And so when I first set foot in law school, I probably didn't have shoes on, and I may have been wearing a tie-dye. I definitely rode my bike to campus, from a house a few blocks away in the student ghetto where I'd lived for many years. So I wasn't, maybe the most typical law student. And I got in there, and back then, there were a lot more mandatory or required courses than there are now at the law school. And some of the courses to some people may have seemed archaic, but were my favorite courses initially, like jurisprudence, for example, the legal philosophy. I really loved that. And I loved Professor Moffat, RIP, Professor Moffat. But anyway, so I didn't really know exactly what my direction was. I was a little bit adrift. I definitely loved the criminal procedure class and constitutional law class that I had. And so then when I took trial practice was my first sort of clue that, okay, I could actually make a life or a career out of being a lawyer, because I really like, standing up and talking to people and sort of being the writer and director and lead role in my own little play. Although when I first started trial practice, I was probably one of the worst students. My partner, Bob, and Bob's now a judge in South Carolina, but we were like the deer in the headlights students that when they said, okay, time for your first opening statement, we were like, oh, we got nothing.
Right. What's an opening statement? Right.
Even though we had practiced, we just, froze
Sure.
up. And we ended up winning the book award in trial practice. And we had the criminal case. And so that really kind of crystallized a direction for me. And then when I took the public defender clinic, with Professor Zedalis was actually still an assistant public defender and was our supervisor. And we had, just a wonderful group of mentors at the public defender's office at that time, like Johnny Kearns and Glenn Weiss, and people that just seemed just like giants to me of just legal knowledge and human compassion, because they represented some of the toughest clients charged with some of the most serious and often gruesome types of crimes. And yet they maintained their ability to just respect the humanity of even the client charged, even Danny Rawling, even the client charged with the worst possible crime. They truly believed that every person deserved a defense and every person deserved to, be treated with compassion and dignity. And that's something that I really gravitated to and really admired. And I knew then that I wanted to try to help people, and I wanted to try to help people that, that were less fortunate than me. I was very fortunate the way, the family I was born into and the family that I had and the support and everything throughout my whole life. And I recognized very early on that not everyone has those kinds of advantages. And so I wanted to make sure that part of my life's goal was public service and to try to help people that, needed a leg up.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I really appreciate that. You're dropping some names, and I was listening, and I hope I mentioned them all again. I really believe it needs to be repeated. Professor Moffat, Professor Zadelis, Johnny Kearns, and Glenn Weiss, right? You and I both consider to be legal giants. And Stacy, you're carrying the torch for them as well. So thank you so much for everything that you're doing. Wonderful people. You answered kind of the next question, which is, what is it that really made you interested in being a public defender? I think maybe you've done that. Can we talk a little bit? Maybe I need to tell our viewers, our students, this, that you were actually responsible for helping bring me into the Eighth Judicial Circuit Public Defender's Office, Levy County. I had done a transfer. I was working up in the Third Circuit in Lake City and got the opportunity, right, to work out in Levy County. And you had worked there before, right? And so they were looking, to fill your position. Big shoes to fill, obviously, Stacy. But yeah, I got to go out there and enjoy practice out there. Can you tell us then about your legal career and how it kind of unfolded, and different areas you worked in, what you liked, and what resonated with you?
Sure. So after I graduated law school, I took the bar right away. And then I took a little bit of time off to do some traveling. Bar results came in, I passed, yay.
Yay.
And I know there's a lot of students out there right now waiting for their results. So good luck to everyone. So I needed to get a job, and I applied at the public defender's office here in the Eighth Circuit, and there were no openings because basically no one ever left because it was such a great place to work. So I ended up, my very first job was as a prosecutor here in the Eighth Circuit. I worked for Rod Smith, who is one of my mentors for sure, and a wonderful trial attorney and great person. And so he hired me, and I worked in the domestic violence division. And then I worked in a pilot program in the state attorney's office where the state attorneys were representing DCF and dependency actions. And so I did that for a time, but my heart was always calling for me to go back to the PD's office. And my predecessor, Rick Parker, who was also a wonderful public defender and wonderful man, he offered me a job. So I switched sides, which was, not the easiest thing to do, because when you're assistant state attorney, historically, for whatever reason, it's like, oh, that's the more prestigious job, and you carry a badge and you have all the power and control. And then I sort of switched to the underdog side, which was really where my heart, my whole life has always been, whether it was for animals or the environment, or, I could be the person that chained themselves to, a giant cypress tree to prevent it from being cut down. Like, that was always part of who I am. And so I switched to the PD's office where I had interned, and, just that's where it really crystallized that was my calling. And I started out in the misdemeanor division in Gainesville, and then was promoted to felony probably too quickly, because, in those days there was a huge high volume of cases, and people kind of got put into cases maybe that were over their head just out of necessity. We used to call it trial by fire. Got put in the felony division, and then when Mr. Parker asked me to go out to Levy County because they needed someone to fill a vacancy there. At first I was reluctant because it's a drive and all that, but then I got out there and absolutely loved it. And actually it's where I first met Brian Kramer, and our now state attorney, and practiced against him, and just had a wonderful time in Levy County. And then I was asked to come back to Gainesville to take over a triple DUI manslaughter. That was the case where one of our state facilities here in Gainesville, that's called Takachali, a van full of residents of Takachali flipped, and the driver, Miss Cersei, was charged with DUI manslaughter. And so I was asked to take over that case from an attorney, Bruce Lasky, also one of my mentors. I would say someone I look up to in life for the bravery and courage he's had to follow his own path. I took over that case from him in the pretrial stage, and that was a really big case. And it was actually on court TV, and it had a lot of novel issues in terms of forensic toxicology, which I was going to talk about that in my war story part, so I can save it for then, or, you know. But anyway, so it just sort of progressed from there. And then I did go into private practice for a couple of years with Craig D. Thomasis and Michael Buchanan. Craig is now one of our circuit judges. That was one of the best legal experiences I've ever had, because Craig and Michael are amazing trial attorneys. And that's what I really wanted to do, was sharpen my skills on the major felony trial experience. And plus they're my good friends. And so it was a wonderful time to practice with them. Life circumstances for me changed. My mom got cancer. She was terminal. I quit working to take care of her. And when I came back to Gainesville after she passed away, I came back to my heart, came back to the public defender's office, was in the juvenile division. I loved that. And then moved up to being county court supervisor. And then when Rick Parker announced his retirement during one of his terms, I was appointed by then Governor Charlie Crist to take over the rest of that term. And then I stood for election in 2012, 16, and 20. And here I am.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Stacy. Yeah, it's a wonderful life journey, I think, that you shared. And yeah, I appreciate you also giving the recognition to the other wonderful attorneys, judges, right, individuals that we worked with over the years. I wanted to ask you about this. You are a member. I was reading them out. It was, you know, like I said, we could spend an hour on this. Thank you for your incredible service, Stacy. I know in terms of charity and volunteering and doing all these various things. Let's talk about our pre-law, and maybe we could go to law students as well. What organizations would you belong to or recommend for them, if you could?
Well, I think for the undergrads belonging to the pre-law, you know, society, or the, you know, group that I've spoken to on campus before is a good idea for networking and kind of, you know, resume building. You know, in terms of law students, I think that there's a real opportunity that a lot of law students miss to participate in the local bar, either through just the Eighth Judicial Circuit Bar Association, or through the Inns of Court program, which there are 2 Inns of Court organizations in Gainesville, where it kind of pairs, you know, very experienced attorneys with mid and low level of experienced attorneys and law students into an organization whose mission is to promote, you know, professionalism and civility in law. And I think those are great organizations. But also getting involved in whatever the subject area that you're most interested in that intersects with law. So whatever that might be. So like for public defenders, like a lot of times I'll see resumes of law students that have been involved in public interest groups, either through the law school or in the community that intersect with our clients and some of the needs and issues that our clients face. And so even if their experience isn't directly related to indigent defense in the criminal setting, you could see that they were very interested in equal justice ideas, or, you know, working for homeless, or help, you know, working with children, or whatever their passion is that then intersects with law. I think that is really important. I think, you know, I wasn't on trial team when I was in law school. probably just because I was a lazy, I don't know, like it seemed like a lot of work. But, I think trial team is a great thing, that since I was a coach for years and I see, how hard the students work, and I know what it means when an applicant comes to me and says, I was on trial team. I know that they work hard, that they've had some training, that they're not going to be starting from ground zero when they walk into the office. And the same is true for like the clinical programs. So, when I see someone that's participated in a public defender clinic, or, some other kind of public interest law clinic, I know that they kind of have a better idea of
Right.
what the work is and whether or not it fits, with them. Because, public defense, like viewed from the ivory tower, is amazing. Like, you're fighting for equal justice. You're making sure that no one, is discriminated against because they don't have money to hire a lawyer. But the reality of public defense is much grittier than that, and it's not always for the faint of heart, right? And so sometimes, when I see someone that has all kinds of great academic interest in doing our work, they sometimes will come in and realize, whoa, I didn't realize I had to spend a lot of time in the jail, and my clients didn't like me, and they didn't trust me, and they kept getting really bad deals from the state, and it was breaking my heart, or whatever, Layne, the circumstances
Exactly.
of being a
Yeah.
public defender.
Yeah.
And it's just, it's no right or wrong to it, but it's just not for everyone. And so when I see an applicant that comes in that's had that experience and they still want to do this work, I'm like, yes, I
Yeah.
think this is probably going to be a good fit.
Yeah, no, I think it's fantastic. And yes, Stacy, I want you to know I gave it my all. I really, really wanted to be that great public defender, right? And I think I was spending a lot of time doing it, but you're right. There are certain applicants, people like yourself, right, that it resonates and it's a great fit. And like you said, it's identifying that talent, right? And the clinical programs and things like that allow you, right, to identify that kind of early talent, that might be there. I think it's wonderful. Thank you. I'm going to try to put a link in. And when we shut it off too, I maybe will talk to you, the ins of court as well. I used to go a long time ago, but it was the skits and everything and preparing the materials, that kind of threw me on that, Stacy. I love going. I think it's a wonderful opportunity, but it was like almost like homework, if that makes sense. I've been told they're getting a little bit away from that. What you mentioned, pre-law honor society, and also the other PAD, the Phi Alpha Delta, those are the two larger, and if there's any others that are listening or out there, send me the link and I'll drop them in as well below. But wonderful opportunities, you're right, for our pre-law students. Are there any, I know that you work with a lot of law students and things. Are there any, would there be any PD opportunities for pre-law students? Or like you said, you recommend kind of the avenue that you were just talking about?
Yeah, well, so we have expanded the opportunities for undergraduate students to have internships in our office. So we do have an investigative internship. So for undergraduates who get to work with our investigators. So they don't necessarily have to be intending to go to law school. They may be intending, to go into criminal justice in another field. We have that internship available. We a couple years ago, I think it's been a couple years now, we started a partnership with the psychology department of UF, when we have psychology interns, which is actually a year-long internship. And that's been really successful. So the students come at it from the psychological angle, but they're involved in a lot of cases and interacting, with clients and clients' case files. Other than that, most of the opportunities are for law students, and we have, of course, the classic, certified legal internship opportunities that are for probably more like 2L or 3L by the time you get the prerequisites for it. But we do sometimes take externs prior to their eligibility to be in a clinic, who then can work, they can't work in court, they can't represent clients in court like a CLI, but they can work on cases and doing legal research and other aspects of some of our bigger cases. So we have those opportunities available.
Wow, thank you for that. Yeah, I always like to say our office could not function without the help, right, of our men, you know, the students, right, that are in our office. And yeah, thank you for all those. I'm going to turn to you probably afterwards and get a link from you and drop it in if that's okay.
Okay.
On it. Hardships that you've encountered along the way and how you've overcame them. What you would be willing to share with us.
Probably, you know, the hardships of being an assistant public defender, that the biggest ones I've encountered, of course, are, you know, sometimes late hours, working on weekends, preparing for trial, which, as you know, is very stressful. You know, making sure you've got everything prepared, that you're completely prepared, that you've done every single thing you can do in order to zealously represent that client and win, right? Lawyers are competitive. You know, I'm competitive, and I want to win for me, and I want to win for my client. And so, you know, you can get pretty driven, you know, up sleepless nights, waking up in the middle of the night, writing thoughts down on a notepad, you know, getting ready, geared up for trial. Other hardships are when you have a client that you see is just getting completely crushed by the system, even if they're guilty of whatever they're accused of, you know, just the punishment being so harsh, or you know, they came from such a troubled background that you understand why they're in the place that they're at, you know, when they committed the crime or when they were arrested, and just how broken people you can find some people when they enter your life as a client, and it can really weigh on you, you know. And then, of course, from an administrator's perspective, you know, hardships are, you know, when you get budget cuts, or when you get the threat of budget cuts like we had last year, and you have to make tough decisions, and you see really good and talented lawyers leave because you can't pay them enough. And, you know, those kinds of things can be pretty tough. One of the benefits of being an assistant public defender is that you don't have to worry about the business side of being a lawyer. You know, you can just kind of practice pure law and client representation.
Right.
You know, so those are the burdens that are on my shoulders. Like, you know, what is the legislature looking at like for next year? How's our budget going to be? You know, how can we make sure we keep what we have and get more that we need? And, you know, what are the threats to, you know, the agency and the public defender statewide that we have to defend against? And, you know, whether that be budget cuts or bad law that might be made that we now are going to get cases on, and we know that it's going to have terrible consequences for people and things like that. It can be rough. I think anyone who wants to do trial work is got to be an adrenaline junkie a little bit. You know, there's the highs and the lows, and, you know, and you get kind of addicted to that, because there's nothing better than winning a trial, you know, and there's nothing worse than losing a trial. And the highest pressure trials are not the ones where the person's guilt is evident, and there's tons and tons of evidence that they're guilty, and maybe they're facing a very harsh consequence. Yes, those are hard and you're prepared, but emotionally, for me, the hardest ones are the ones where I think the person is not guilty or even innocent, and there's a difference. And you could win. The trials that you could win are the ones that are the highest pressure, because then you really feel like there's something that I could do to make it turn to a W instead of an L, and that's where the pressure really comes on.
Yeah, exactly. I wanted to ask you about this, Stacy. Do you think we always gave ourselves, I know, so much pressure as public defenders, and, you know, we really wanted to win and everything. Do you think, maybe sometimes I felt like I gave myself more credit for, you know, the win, or more responsibility for the loss, you know, when it happened? How instrumental would you say the public defenders are, you know, in the scheme of things? Is it the thing, or I know it's an important variable or important component, right?
Right. I think it's human nature to want to take credit for a win and blame yourself for a loss if you're a person with a conscience, of course. If you don't have a conscience, then you don't really care if you lost, right? But yeah, I think that's human nature. But I think we probably overemphasize the minutia in a trial, like, oh, if I just would have turned a phrase this way, it would have been different. Or, oh, I messed up, this direct and it wasn't as smooth as it could have been. And I forgot to say something in my closing. I think that kind of stuff probably matters less than what happens before the trial. I think what happens before the trial is what's paramount. Your preparation, your investigation, the amount of thought that you put into the strategy of your defense and anticipating all the things that could happen at a trial that you need to be prepared for, and the things that you think of that the state attorney didn't because they didn't put as much work into it as you did. And so those kinds of things I think are incredibly important. But yeah, I mean, sometimes even if you did all of that 100% and you performed 100% in the trial and you still lose, and sometimes that's just the facts. The facts are what the facts are, and there's just so many variables when you pick a jury. Like a friend of mine is a musician and he wrote a song called "Don't Bet on a Jury. You might get a surprise." And I think that's true, like you can't really know how an individual juror is going to view what you've presented. And then there's a whole different entity, which is the jury as a whole. And once they interact with each other, what kinds of, what goes on to produce the result that they come up with, those kinds of things are beyond, our control. And you never really know what a jury is going to focus on necessarily, as their what they decided the case on, and I remember that movie Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil. And I went to a seminar once, and the lawyer who was involved in that case was presenting.
Sonny Seiler.
Yeah, and I think that what my memory of it is that what the jury kind of pinned their verdict on was, that the state kept saying the crime scene was secure, the crime scene was secure, the crime scene was secure. And then like in one of the photos, there was like a cat walking through the crime scene. And the jury was like, "What's it? Look at that. It's not secure. Like there's a cat." And so I think that, you never know what a jury's going to take and run with. So, I think sometimes we are too hard on ourselves about exactly how what we said and did and on the really minute level, but nothing can substitute for total preparation.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's a great book and movie, by the way. Also I was thinking of the movie with Keanu Reeves, Devil's Advocate, where he's listening. Do you remember? He had a chance to go in the bathroom and actually hear the jury deliberating. But I think, like you said, Stacy, it's so every time groupthink with different juries is so different every time, right? That trying to find some system or correlation pattern here, maybe just verboten, I don't know, outside, of our knowledge, our ability to know,
Exactly.
Yeah. Thank you. Let's see real quick. We're going to come up with the fun things here. Interesting battles handled and war stories. Stacy, would you be okay? I'm going to divide it in part 2. We're going to take a very quick break. We're going to be right back, if you're okay with that.
Yeah.
This is wonderful. And then we'll be coming out, coming in on a high note here, I think.
Sounds
Thank you.
good.
Thank you.
All right.
We'll be right back with part 2.